All right, welcome, folks. Thanks for joining us. This is our best attended webinar since COVID, so I'm glad so many people are interested in the BANK CTE study. As people are piling in, and we're going past 250 right now, as per usual, those who've been here before, we would love to know where you are coming in from. So where are you? And if you want, because this is a more scientific study, we'd love to know what your big sport was, where you had hopefully 5 or more years of exposure. Or feel free to tell us even your age. We're sort of curious who's coming, who's here. Wow, Daryl Perry first, welcome. All right, Calvin Amato, Nicole Taylor, football, rugby, soccer, equestrian. Oh, it's coming in fast and furious. Mick, welcome. A lot of friendly faces, names we know. All right, Olympia, Washington. John Gall's here. Hello, sir. All right, this is great. All right, looks like, I love it. Cheerleaders. All right, Huntsville, Alabama. Welcome. We'll kick it off now. Welcome and thank you for joining us. The Concussion Legacy Foundation and the Boston University CTE Center are proud to co-host today's webinar, Detecting CTE in the Blood, New BU Research Study. I'm Dr. Nowinski, co-founder and CEO of the Concussion Legacy Foundation. This groundbreaking study we're launching today, BANK CTE, is truly years in the making, and I really consider it the next frontier in research on CTE. As many of you know, we've spent since 2008 partnered with the BU CTE Center to try to build up our knowledge of CTE. CTE was a neglected disease ever since it was first seen in boxers 100 years ago. And we are finally have learned enough to launch this very important study. Basically, by studying the brains of those who've passed away, and thank you to the family members who are here who have lost a loved one and made this possible, we can now have some hypotheses for how we will be able to diagnose CTE in living people just using blood. This precedent's been set by this. In 2022, the FDA approved an Alzheimer's disease blood biomarker panel that we now know works about as well as anything that we've ever been using in Alzheimer's disease, but it's low cost. And so this is the next frontier. This is the next generation. This, I hope, as somebody who got hit in the head way too much, I hope this might be the study that helps get us to a place where we can start doing clinical trials on drugs, start to measure the impact of interventions, see if proteins in our blood that we don't want go down. Many of you are here are familiar with the CLF Research Registry. For those who are not, scan this QR code right in front of you and click on the link sign in the chat to sign up. You can click on the QR code or click the link in the chat to sign up. And there you can pledge your brain to research, also join our registry, because this is one of multiple studies that we are doing, but this is one that's very important, so I hope you join it. And you'll be the first to hear about future studies. So before we dive into the specifics of BANK CTE and everything that led up to this moment, I'd like to introduce you to our excellent panel for today's program. We will be joined today by 3 members of the incredible research team behind BANK CTE, Kelsey Goostrey, project manager for the study, as well as Dr. Michael Alosco and Dr. Thor Stein. Also this afternoon, we'll speak to one of the very first people to participate in BANK CTE, Pete Cronan, my buddy, a good former NFL linebacker and longtime college football broadcaster and longtime advocate for this cause. He'll join us to explain why he joined the study and walk us through the process and tell you it's much simpler than you might think. We'll also be joined by Dennis Goldenberg, who's helping fund the study. At the Concussion Legacy Foundation, we are so proud to be partners and collaborators with the BU CTE Center. It is we started this partnership back in 2008. It's been, almost 17 years of a wonderful collaboration. Basically, we came to them, Dr. Cantu and I, our co-founder, as advocates, as people who said, we think there's a problem, but let's figure it out together. And Dr. Ann McKee, the director, and Dr. Bob Stern said, yes, we're going to dedicate our careers to CT now, because they knew back then, I think that inkling that we all did, this was much bigger than we realized. So it's exciting to get to this point because this is a very exciting study. So I'd like to welcome the BU research team for more on how we got to this groundbreaking study, the background, and why you might want to participate. We'll have a brief Q&A with the research team following their presentation. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box. And now I'll turn things over to Kelsey to introduce BANK CTE. Kelsey played Division I hockey at Holy Cross and is now a project manager for BANK CTE. Welcome, Kelsey.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nowinski, for the introduction. Let me see if I can share my screen real quick. Does that all look good? Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We're so excited to have you here to share this new innovative study that really has the potential to lead us to a significant scientific breakthrough by discovering a way to diagnose CTE during life. As Dr. Nowinski said, my name is Kelsey, and I'm the project manager for BANK CTE. And the big question that we're looking to answer is, can we detect CTE in blood? Today, I will be introducing the components of participation in BANK, who is eligible, and then provide instructions on how to participate. After that, I'll turn it over to my incredible colleagues, Dr. Alosco and Dr. Stein, who will talk more about the research that led up to this groundbreaking study and how together we can make a breakthrough. So before getting into some more information, I just want to disclose that the study is funded by the National Institute of Neurologic Disorders and Stroke, and also briefly introduce the rest of the study team here at Boston University. In this circle here is William Cole French, who is our participant liaison, and he will be available for any questions that you may have prior to and during your participation. So at any time, if you have any questions, please do reach out to him, and the email is bankcte@bu.edu, and I believe that will go in the chat as well. Okay, so what are the components of participation in BANK? There are 3 steps that you'll need to do in order to complete the study. The first is an online survey that can be done at your own pace. It includes questions about playing history, military service, family history, some general health surveys, and then some interactive brain games. We'll also ask you to complete a blood draw at a Quest diagnostic lab that is local to you, and you can schedule this at a time during the week that works best for you. These appointments are generally taking about 15 minutes. And we'll also ask you to sign a brain donation pledge. If you've already pledged to donate your brain through the CLF brain donation registry, this won't affect that at all. We are also asking that you do share the pledge with your family members. We know this can be a difficult conversation to start, but it's very important for them to be aware of your wishes. And if you are interested, we have developed some study flyers that help start the conversation on why you decided to donate your brain. Upon completion of all of these study procedures, you will receive a $100 electronic gift card as a thank you. We hope that because this is a web-based study, it will allow more people across the US to participate. So who is eligible for BANK CTE? This study, we are recruiting men and women 40 years and older to participate. And we are, not just looking for contact and collision sport athletes. We definitely want, football, soccer, ice hockey, and extreme sport athletes, but we're also looking to recruit military veterans with and without combat and blast exposures, as well as controls. It's very important to get representation from all of these groups, including women and persons from underrepresented communities, because this will allow us to have a more representative sample and provide valuable insights into how repetitive head impacts affect different groups. Controls are also extremely valuable and provide a wonderful comparison group. We need to enroll 1,000 participants, so we encourage you to share the study with your former teammates, people you served with, family, and friends. And this is a great opportunity for people who haven't played contact and collision sports to get involved in this research. So how do you participate? So if you are eligible to participate in BANK CTE. You'll go to the website, which is here, and I think we'll go in the chat as well, where you'll complete an online eligibility survey. And if you are eligible, you'll be directed to the participant portal. I do want to note that if you have already completed the HIT study through BU, you've already completed one of the study procedures. So please do reach out to us at the bankcte@bu.edu email, and we can connect you with a link to the study so you won't have to complete those questions again. I do encourage everyone to check out the BANK CTE website, which I'll share in just a second, as there's a lot of great information there. I'm just going to try to toggle in between my screens real quick, so appreciate your patience. Let's see. No. Okay. So this is the BANK CTE website. On the main page, there's a lot of great information that you can get about the background of the study. We also have resources on how to schedule your Quest visit, information on the BANK questionnaires, and then frequently asked questions on brain donation. And if you click Enroll Now, you'll be directed to the eligibility screener, and you'll be directed to answer a few questions, and then you submit. And if you are eligible, you'll be directed to the participant portal, which I will share here on this slide. So this is just a screenshot of what the participant portal will look like. On the left, you will see are the different study components that you'll be asked to complete. And in the middle is your study dashboard that will track your progress. So once you complete all the study activities, this progress bar will move to 100% and you'll be eligible for payment. Lastly, I just wanted to share a few ways you can stay connected with the BANK CTE study and the BU CTE Center. I encourage you to subscribe to the BU CTE Center newsletter, as well as follow us on social media to just stay up to date with study progress and new opportunities for research study participation that may come up. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Alosco, one of the co-primary investigators for the BANK CTE study. You may recognize him. He has done a number of webinars and presentations with CLF in the past, and he has been a part of the BU CTE Center since 2015. He is highly respected in the CTE and Alzheimer's disease research fields, and he will be talking more about how BANK CTE has the potential to move us closer to diagnosing CTE in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelsey. Hello, everyone. It's really exciting to see so many people join us. I can't tell you how much it means to us to see you all here and to be interested in the study. I also want to start off by just thanking Kelsey. She and the team have been doing an amazing job and can answer all questions that you might have about participating in the study. So we, Dr. Stein and myself, applied for this grant about a year ago now. And it actually, the origins of how we came to it was over a meal at a conference where we were both talking, looked at each other and we were seeing all this great research being done in Alzheimer's disease and blood-based biomarkers and just looking at the blood to detect these diseases. Like, why can't we do this with CTE? And then we thought, and then what about Concussion Legacy Foundation? They have this huge research registry. Why don't we just partner with them, get a blood draw on people, and that's it? And so fast forward a year later, we applied for the grant. We were successful on the first time, and we're off and running. It's been a great and really rewarding experience, and I just want to share a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish and how we got there. All right, so let's start with the disease. Kind of what are we trying to actually detect here? We are trying to detect CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. So many of you here are familiar with CTE, but it is a disease characterized by the abnormality of a protein called tau. So we all have this protein in our brain, but in CTE it becomes abnormal. And this is what it looks like in a brain. It looks like This brown is all this abnormal tau. It gathers around small blood vessels. You see this white circle here is a small blood vessel, and it tends to gather at the bottom of the folds of the brain. We also see that it starts in early stages. It starts to gather in the front parts of the brain, and then it starts to spread, beginning to affect the memory centers and middle parts of the brain later on before becoming more widespread. So this is a disease that's unique from Alzheimer's disease. It's unlike any other disease. We don't see this pattern. We only see it in CTE. Now, the problem is that at this time, we can only diagnose CTE after someone passes away and we look at the brain under a microscope. We lack the ability at this time to accurately detect and diagnose it during life, which is a major problem given we need to be able to do this in order to start to study and implement treatments. More importantly, this is a major public health concern given we're seeing this across all different types of individuals who've played different contact sports, served in the military, been exposed to physical violence. So this is an area of priority for research in the Alzheimer's disease and dementia community. And the way that there's two steps that we need to accomplish in order to be able to diagnose this disease during life. The first is characterizing the signs and symptoms. So what does this disease look like in someone? In Alzheimer's disease, for example, we know generally what to expect. Usually we see memory problems to begin with, and then we know how it progresses from there. We've made a lot of advances on what the signs and symptoms of CTE looks like, but we're still not quite there yet. Just in 2021, so not too long ago, we published traumatic encephalopathy syndrome. These are research diagnostic criteria that are designed to describe the signs and symptoms of CTE. And it talks about that there needs to be this presence of repetitive head impacts. There needs to be presence of impairment in thinking, particularly in memory and executive function or problem solving, multitasking. We also see this symptom called neurobehavioral dysregulation, which really refers to impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, kind of being explosive. And we can use these criteria to help determine the odds for having CTE. But these are currently only for research right now. We are not at the point where we can actually bring them into the clinic and accurately say whether or not we think someone has CTE. We have this new study that launched, not so new anymore, but it's called HITS. It started back in 2022. Some of you may be quite familiar with it, but this is the largest study of its kind. It's focused on former female and male soccer players, as well as former male American football players. And I want to introduce HITS to you all today if you have not heard of it, because it is a component of BANK CTE. And the goal of this study is to really look at these signs and symptoms of people with repetitive head impacts. And so what we're doing with HITS is it's a completely online survey, just like Kelsey was talking about. It's confidential and secure. We're asking questions about sports participation, medical history, different types of mood and behavior symptoms. There's a bunch of what I like to call fun brain games. These are computerized thinking and memory tests. If you've done this before, you might disagree with me about being fun, but it is really important. They can be completed on a mobile device, but the games do have to be done on a laptop. It does take a little bit of time, but it's just as long as if you were to come in person for a visit to look at your thinking and memory, and more importantly, can be done at home at your convenience. So this is what I'm describing, one component to BANK CTE, and more importantly, it's one component to better understanding the specific signs and symptoms of people who've had repetitive head impacts. But really, what's going to get us there to be able to diagnose CTE during life is when we can figure out the signs and symptoms and then combine that with what we call a biomarker. So everyone here knows what a biomarker is. If you have trouble with your heart, you get an EKG. If you have trouble, if you want to look for diabetes, you look at your blood sugar. We're doing the same thing here, except we're trying to get a marker of the brain, of some abnormalities in the brain. And that's how we get our best and most accurate diagnosis. This is the model for Alzheimer's disease. This is the model for other types of dementias. It works really well. And this is the framework we're following for CTE. So we've looked at different biomarkers. So here's an example of an MRI. Up on the top left corner of your screen is an MRI scanner. We're trying to evaluate for shrinkage of the brain. So a lot of these neurodegenerative diseases we see, they cause neuronal and cell death that leads to shrinkage of the brain. You can look at different patterns. Different diseases have different patterns, and they help to diagnose these conditions. We've looked at something called tau PET. This is where there's certain tracers that are injected into your forearm. These tracers have a little bit of radioactivity, but they can travel into the brain. They can find that tau protein or that amyloid protein in the case of Alzheimer's, stick to it, and then you can take pictures to actually visualize some of these diseases. Worked really well in Alzheimer's disease. We're currently studying their utility in CTE. Now, the issue with both MRI and PET scan is that they are expensive. This PET scan, one PET scan is thousands of dollars. It's not accessible. You can't do this on a large scale. And many communities are not going to be able to get access to these through their regular care. That is what brings us to the blood. Imagine if you can kind of just go onto your primary care providers or to your other healthcare provider, get a blood draw, and screen for these diseases through a simple blood draw. This is really becoming, this has been an explosion of science in Alzheimer's disease. We've done some research here at BU studying how well looking at the blood can predict Alzheimer's disease in the brain in this study back in 2022. And we found that we can actually capture the proteins of Alzheimer's disease in the blood and that it correlates really well with what we see in the brain. And that's what BANK CTE is. Can we replicate what we're doing in Alzheimer's disease to do in CTE? And so BANK CTE combines three of the most critical elements that I think we're going to need to discover ways to detect and diagnose this disease during life. It combines signs and symptoms, HITS, the study I just mentioned. That's one survey you'll be completing. We need to characterize the signs and symptoms. Then we will ask for a blood draw. The blood draw will be our biomarker. We're going to look at different types of proteins in the blood. And then lastly, and arguably the most important, is brain donation. Brain donation is what Dr. Stein is going to get into, but is our gold standard for determining whether or not this disease is actually present in the brain. So we'll be able to correlate with what we see in the blood against what we find in the brain, and that's ultimately what's going to get us to the place where we can detect and diagnose these conditions. And one point I want to stress with BANK CTE is that this is a study, and one of the reasons why I'm most excited about, this is a study where we're looking at all different types of people and exposures. We are really focused on engaging persons from underrepresented backgrounds. We're really focused on getting military veterans involved. We want to focus on contact and collision sport athletes across the continuum. We want to understand these issues in all people. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stein, and he's going to go over the brain donation part of it.
Great, thanks, Mike. So my name's Thor Stein. I'm a neuropathologist, and I'm going to talk to you about brain donation, which I know sounds like a big deal, and it is, but I hope I can convince you that it can be a relatively simple process, and the information that we're able to learn from the brain after looking at it after death really is essential for our understanding of disease, for advancing health and medicine, and will be crucial, I think, for helping future generations. So next slide, please, Mike. If you look at the brain, I mean, it's really a remarkable organ. It's about 3.5 pounds, but yet it kind of encompasses everything that we are as a person. And yet we really understand very little about it. And there's still a remarkable amount of information we have yet to kind of glean. And a lot of that, I think we can better understand if we look at the brain after death. There's a lot of new science that's coming out that's allowing us to really dive in and better understand the diseases that affect the brain. Now, the process can sound daunting, but we try to make it relatively simple. We have at the BU CTE Center folks who are on call 24/7. So if you agree to a brain donation, it's crucial to let your family know, of course, your next of kin, because they'll be the ones who will then reach out after death and let us know. And we have a network of individuals across the country who are able to work with the funeral home and work on getting the brain and then sending it as quickly as possible to the BU CTE Center. Often people ask, will this interfere with a funeral? And it won't. It's not a disfiguring process. You can absolutely still have an open casket funeral if you wish. If you go to the next slide, please, Mike. We have really an amazing staff who is really dedicated to the work and is available to receive the brain at all hours. So Ray Nix, who's off on the left here, has been with us many years and is really dedicated, is available on weekends, holidays, as are many of us, to take in cases and to process the brain and do the things that we need to do really as quickly as possible after death. And our team too is really dedicated. A lot of them have played contact collision sports or served in the military themselves and suffered concussions. And so they have a real vested interest in this and are really interested in trying to further the science, better understand things and make things better for future folks who might suffer from some of the injuries that can occur. If you go to the next slide, there's a number of things that we do to really maximize the use of the brain. We preserve the tissue in a way that it can be preserved really in perpetuity. So we process it so that we can evaluate the brain and make our pathological diagnoses, show some of the pathologies that Dr. Alosco showed you earlier, that tau pathology, which we need to stain, right? That's not visible without the processing that we do in the lab to actually be able to look at it. We process the brain so that we can do that and make those diagnoses. But we also preserve the tissue in these ultra low freezers that are -80 degrees. So that's 60 degrees colder than a normal freezer that you'd have in your kitchen, for instance. So it really preserves the tissue. It keeps the tissue useful for decades into the future, and allows us then to take advantage of these cutting edge research technologies that where we can really probe molecularly what's going on in the brain. Next slide. We then have a lot of advanced microscopy in order to try to interpret some of these pathologies. So we now, all of the slides that get generated from different areas of the brain and stained, we look at under the microscope, we digitally capture them and have these digital representations of whole slide imaging and use machine learning and AI techniques to help us interpret that data. And that's kind of ongoing research as we try to learn more about some of these more advanced analytical techniques that really, I think, are going to accelerate our understanding of these disease processes. Next slide. Already we've learned a lot. We know that repetitive hits to the head that occur in contact collision sports can cause CTE, right? That's shown by this left arrow. But we also have learned that it is linked to other pathologies, the pathologies of Parkinson's disease, the pathologies of Alzheimer's. We don't think it causes Alzheimer's, but it might accelerate it and it changes the way that it presents in the brain. And it's also been, we've very recently found that it's linked to this new protein called TDP43, which plays a really important role in a variety of different diseases. The next slide. And we're already doing this. So I labeled this future directions, but this is work that we're already doing where we're taking advantage of these advanced molecular techniques so that we can sequence all of the genes that are expressed in different parts of the brain. And we can look at how they've been modified kind of during your life. And that's called epigenetics. And then also we use some of these big platforms to look at we're able to profile thousands of proteins. So we can really generate big science, big data that I think allows us to answer specific questions, but also allows us to open it up and see and learn new things that we haven't maybe thought about before. Next slide. Some of the things that we've already found, and really that's formed the basis of this study, is we've looked at that tau protein that Dr. Alosco talked about. And we know that tau can be modified at about 80 different sites within its protein. And that's what's kind of illustrated here in this schematic. We looked at 4 of these sites that are present very early in disease. And if you hit the button, Mike, that'll highlight the 4 sites we looked at. And then if you go to the next slide, we found that levels of these different sites could accurately discriminate between CTE and another degenerative disease, Alzheimer's disease. And so we think that the ratio, particularly of tau modified at this 202 residue compared to 396, might be a marker for CTE. We did this in the brain tissue, right? So we required the brain to do this. Our question here with BANK CTE is, can we detect these modifications in the blood? And would this be a marker? So this is one of the hypotheses we're seeking to test. By getting the blood, we can look for these measures and see if this might be a predictor or a diagnostic marker of developing CTE-like pathology in the brain. Next slide. So that's really the outline of the study. As Kelsey and Mike kind of outlined, we want to link the brain to the blood and really try to predict these diseases, have a diagnostic measure, and then also identify targets that we can develop treatments towards. So we'll have something that we can test current treatments that are out there and then also develop new treatments. And so having all of this information is necessary to kind of put all these pieces of the puzzle together. And so that's really our goal. Next slide. Of course, none of this would be possible without our brain donors and their families and you. So we're very grateful to all of our brain donors and their families. This is a picture of some of them who attended the family huddle which CLF hosts every 2 years, where we get together with some of the family members and share some of the research progress that we've made in the past 2 years, utilizing the tissue that their loved ones have donated. So we're very grateful to all the families and to you, and we really appreciate you joining the webinar and hearing about our study.
Thanks, Dr. Stein, and really great job by everybody explaining this really awesome study. So we have time for some questions. So there are a lot of questions in the Q&A, and so I want to bring up a few of them so that we can better understand this study. So first of all, I'd like to apologize to all our Canadian folks who are here who want to be a part of this. Part of this is because Quest Labs, the relationships with the U.S. company. So this is only open for Americans right now, but CLF Canada is very strong right now, led by Tim Fleischer, with a lot of great relationships with the University of Toronto, CAMH, some other folks. So it'd be very cool if they were able to set up the same thing, but we will see, and that will be up to them. Any plans, Dr. Stein, Dr. Alosco, for people younger than 40, or do you want to talk about that? Why starting at 40?
Yeah, I think we definitely want to go earlier. This is our first foray into this, and so and we want to link the blood to the brain. And so we're trying to pick people who are a little bit older to make that link. But we hope once we have some initial data that we can expand it and look at younger folks. But right now the reason for 40 and older is really, you know, just to increase the likelihood that we'll get some brains. We're no rush, but a little bit of rush.
Yeah. So sorry about that. But, you know, yeah, I guess as somebody who's 45 who's eligible and signed up for the study, myself, just be happy you're not 40 yet. You know, enjoy your youth. Another question, will people get the results of their participation? So I guess the results of their blood study in advance of any brain donation.
Yeah, that's a good question and something we've struggled with. At this time, the answer is not no. But in the future, we're looking at how can we get these results back to people, because it could be important information. It's really complicated when you're doing a remote study where there's not a lot of interface with clinicians to kind of give results and let people kind of go off. So we're trying to think of the best model and the right information to give back. So we'll definitely keep you posted on that.
Yeah, and I understand that. I think it's fair. You know, part of the issue is until we know what the blood studies mean from doing the study, getting your tests may just cause worry. But that's not that we learned is meaningless.
Right.
So we don't want to. Yeah.
Right. But the other, you do complete signs and symptoms questionnaires where there could be an opportunity there, and we're trying to figure out that part of it too.
Okay, cool. And how about people who are here on behalf of others who may not be able to consent themselves, or if you're power of attorney or healthcare proxy, can they enroll?
That's a great question for Kelsey. Kelsey, you want to join us and explain that?
Sorry. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so at this time, the consent form is for the person participating, but if this is the case for you, please do reach out to our team and we can work to see if this is a possibility.
Yes, good question. How about first responders? So you have firefighters, police officers. Are they eligible with that exposure at this point?
So we're looking at contact and collision sports and military veterans here. I would say that there is a potential possibility to be eligible, because we are looking for almost everyone, and including people without repetitive head impacts or low levels of repetitive head impacts or medium levels. So I guess my recommendation is that we have a screener form, and that screener form will tell you whether or not you're eligible, because in reality, we are not really excluding many people who are over the age of 40 here, because we're interested in the full continuum. There is a possibility for some to be eligible, but complete the screener and that'll tell you the information.
Okay. Yeah, and again, we're always looking to expand, but funds are limited, so we have to be narrow on a research hypothesis to get funded. All right, there's lots of good questions. I'm trying to decide what to do next. When do we expect to be able to publish results? That all depends on a lot of different variables, but what's a good estimate?
Dr. Stein?
Well, I think it'll probably be a little bit before we can publish results directly from this, but we already have been collecting some bloods post-mortem on some of the brain donors. And so I think we're hopeful that in the next year or so, we'll have a study that is looking at some preliminary data on these, linking these postmortem blood to the brain pathology. And that'll really help guide us going forward, I think.
Great. Someone's asking about finding doctors to continue with medical monitoring. So that's more in the CLF helpline role. So if anyone here actually is struggling with symptoms or worried they might have CT and wants to find a doctor, wants to learn more about how they could approach their symptoms, go to clfhelpline.org and we will connect you with a doctor through our international network and medical referrals and peer support groups and all those things to help you. That's one of our roles at CLF. I do want to address, there's a family here who who had tried to donate the brain of their husband who'd signed up, and they were unable to donate. And so I want to thank the McSherry family for trying and for supporting. We still want to have you involved in the Concussion Legacy Foundation, Legacy Family community and our family. So please just email me. You can email any member of our team or me directly at Nowinski@concussionfoundation.org. But we want to keep this relationship alive. One thing that's important for everyone to know when it comes to brain donation, I'm signed up, lots of us are signed up. We can never guarantee that a brain can be taken. There's a few different variables. One is if we find out in time and we're able, usually we have to have it all done within 72 hours in terms of the brain donation. And you have to have certain, you have to be able to hire somebody to go do it. And there's a lot of logistics involved. So sometimes the team's very good and usually works out, but sometimes there's issues with logistics. The other part is that we have to, again, the brains we might have taken, in 2015 or today are not necessarily the brains that we can take based on our grants in 5 years or in 10 years. And so sometimes there's really, for this study, we can take these brains. If you've signed up, you've given blood, you meet this criteria. But other studies where you're not involved in a clinical research study that also involves brain donation, unfortunately, there can never be a perfect guarantee. The science changes, our grants change, what we can accept changes, our interests, might change for reasons that we cannot predict. So I hate to have everyone be disappointed and know this is just a fact of brain donation. But I do want to keep in touch with this family. So please do reach out to me, and we do appreciate it. And I'm sorry it didn't work out, but it's the nature of the beast. All right, other question, does it interfere with plans to be an organ donor?
So no, absolutely not. You can still be an organ donor. We try to coordinate with that team to make sure that both can occur.
Yeah, but not an issue. Question around the process for brain donation, the same for cremation. So you want to talk about those steps and give an example?
Yeah, so no difference. I mean, whether you have cremation or whatever your plans are, we would coordinate with the funeral home to make to make the donation occur, and then your plans can continue as you like.
Great. We've got a lot of friendly faces here and that we know. So a couple former football players that I know. One asked, already pledged my brain years ago. Do I just go through the process? The answer is yes. Just go to bankct.org and sign up, and you'll just add one more trip to the what you're already doing, along with hopefully if you're part of HITS as well. Another person asked, they've done other studies with us where blood was drawn. Do they need to draw blood again and sign up for this specific study? Thoughts?
Mike, probably yes, right? Yes. If you're a part of others, that we have a lot of different types of studies at the BU CTE Center, and we try to be as flexible as possible to minimize burden to you all. So yes, we can make things happen like that.
All right. And that was a question from a Canadian. Can Canadians do brain donation? So as of now, yes, Canadians can do brain donation, but not specifically this study. Okay. Some good science questions that go beyond the scope of this. Will this study help bolster the TES criteria?
Yeah, so the TES criteria, one of the things we're trying to do is make them more specific to being able to detect and diagnose CTE. And in order to make them more specific is to identify a biomarker. And that's exactly what we're doing with this study.
Great. Okay. Yeah, another question there. Information we give to doctors and specialists that you refer us to because they don't necessarily listen. We continue to try to improve our resources through the helpline so that you can go into the doctors with the right question or educate them, because we also offer continuing medical education credits for your doctor if you want to suggest to them to get caught up on the latest and greatest. Dr. Alosco and Dr. Mez have a clinical how do you treat someone suspected CTE that is it'll be on demand soon for anyone to watch. So I think we'll wrap there because we still have to get to our patient zero. my buddy Pete Cronan. So thank you very much to the BU CTE Center team here for the not only for this study, but the advances you've made over the past 15 years that are really making a difference, that are making sports safer, that are giving all of us who've been hitting ahead too much hope that we will have better answers going forward. So appreciate it very much, and thanks again.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, now our second to last guest, someone who brings in a very valuable perspective, given his participation here. Pete Cronan. Pete Cronan is an old friend of CLF, and he actually let me interview him for my book that came out in 2006. So we go way back, and he's one of the first ex-NFL players to really be honest with me about what really happened out there. So I grew up in Massachusetts, played at Boston College, was a star linebacker, then the second round NFL pick, played 9 years in the league, won Super Bowl 17. If you're spent any time in New England, you've heard him as a color commentator for BC football. But he's joining us today because he is one of the very first people to go through BANK CTE. So, Pete, thank you very much for joining us today.
Chris, glad you invited me. I need the opportunity to spread the word. Call me up. You know,
you're a good man. So tell me, what is the as a member of a fraternity of football players at BC and the NFL who are aware of this and have lost people, what is the conversation right now?
Oh, it's top of mind. It's really very prevalent because I'm 69 years old. Got a lot of guys I played college ball with that didn't go on to the NFL, and all those guys I did play with. And when you think about the number of years in that sport, the way it was coached in those days, like I played 17 years of organized football, and everything I was taught was geared towards using my head as the primary point of contact, the crown of my helmet. So it's changed. You know, all of the energy around brain trauma, injuries, player safety, and so forth has forced an evolution that I believe will all who participate will benefit from. But what we went through back in the dark days, the Stone Age, right after leather helmets, I think is we're broadly exposed, and we don't see each other that frequently like we did every day when we were back 45 years ago. But now we see each other maybe once every 6 months or maybe once a year, and the deterioration on an individual basis is remarkable. You just notice people are just losing their fastball, and in so many cases, it's brain trauma and the consequences of brain trauma manifesting, before our eyes. So it really is top of mind, front of mind. We're all talking about it. We discuss our friends, the circumstances they're dealing with, and there are many. And you just have to question, okay, why was I spared? And I probably wasn't, but there are a lot of reasons why. But this study is going to help us better understand moving forward. Number one, what causes the issues? Number two, what the issues are. Number three, can you diagnose? Number four, can you treat? And if you can be proactive in your treatment, extend your life and maintain a high quality of life, it's all, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, that's great. So can you walk us through the process of signing up for this and the steps that followed with the blood draw?
It was pretty simple. You and I spoke, you gave me a link. I clicked on the link. I filled out some preliminary information, made arrangements to have a blood draw, answered a series of medical questions, typical, allergies and so forth, and scheduled an appointment at Quest, the local Quest office, which was literally, 2 miles from my home. Walked in, got the blood test, and that was that. It was a painless, easy exercise. Took me all of about, including, filling out the questionnaire, probably all of about an hour of my time, all in.
Wow, that's great. So what would you tell someone who might be on the fence about signing up?
I'd ask them why. Knowledge is power, and as we continue to age, again, everything we put together, it's a building block approach. It's taking small steps. And I was one of the early guys in the program, and it's just remarkable from my perspective to see how far you guys have gone. and the level of interest, the visibility, and the impact. And I know when we first met, you were bullish on outlawing youth football, and I didn't really understand it. And then when I became more aware of the consequences of contact at that level and the consequences of brain trauma at that level, it became very clear that it should be outlawed. And if you're going to play football, organized contact football, you probably should start in high school if you're going to do that. But it took me a little while to come around to understand the risks, but it really makes an awful lot of sense. So the fewer shots to the head, the better people's quality of life is going to be, and the longer they're going to live, and the higher quality their life's going to be.
Yeah, well said. And it's interesting sort of listening to you talk and share these stories and the conversations we had. I know a lot of the families who are here who have gotten CT diagnoses, like a lot of those are some very heartbreaking, tragic stories. And those are the stories that often get our attention, the athletes who die young. But also, it's interesting to hear you say, you may or may not have CT, you played a long time, you may, but, talking to you, I love how great you sound. And so it's just a reminder that not every, even if you're one of these young people in midlife worried, like, what's going to happen next year, you look at a guy like Pete Cronan, you may have CT, but, you look and you sound great. And so I hope I sound as good as you at 69.
It's something in the water, Chris.
All right. So just to wrap up, I appreciate, you were one of the early guys who pledged his brain. You signed up for a lot of studies over the years. And I love the fact that you're always focused on your teammates and the guys you played with, and that's who you're thinking about, along with how this could benefit you when you're doing this. So you just want to just reflect on that again about why, so many athletes are signing up, and veterans and a lot of it's about taking care of the people that they lined up next to or served with.
Well, that's kind of the light going on when you, as I described, that the infrequency between meetings, and as you age, the symptoms begin to accelerate, and then you just see people that can't carry on a conversation. That you like. I play golf with a buddy of mine, who his wife makes it very clear to me, you need to drive the cart, you need to tell him where the ball is, you probably need to pick his club. You got to keep his score. And he's one of my former teammates in college. And when we reflect on he didn't play at the NFL, but when we reflect upon his experience in college, he had a propensity for head injuries. Now, I remember him getting his nickname was Bullet. And, the name is self-explanatory. And so he used his head. It was the way we were being taught. The evolution is just remarkable if you look at kind of where we were to where we are. And the game, football, and American football in particular, has evolved or devolved, depends on how you want to look at it. And what people need to understand, especially in American football, when steps were taken to develop defensive equipment, the helmet, the shoulder pads, the knee pads, what happened was we turned them into offensive weapons, and it just intensified the acceleration when you roll in larger bodies, more athletic bodies, more pure surfaces, better foot gear, strength training, you name it. All of this compounds to higher intensity collisions, all adding to the risk of brain trauma. And what's interesting too, Chris, it's worth noting is, my understanding is that there are 3 basic classifications for brain trauma, a concussion. The first one is when you get knocked out. The fighter gets knocked out in the 5th round, he's down, he's out. And we see that occasionally in football. We see that occasionally. Another form of that is when you see players, they cramp up, they have body spasms, and they take them off in the car. Okay, those are rare, but they happen. Class 2 is a loss of short-term memory. You forget where you were an hour ago, how you got to the park, what were you doing 5 minutes ago. You forget all your short-term memory goes. And those are what I classify as Class Bs. Now, I never had a Class A, but I had 9 Class Bs. My first one was at 3 years old. They fell out of a bunk bed, cracked my skull, and that was my first concussion. Maybe a peek in the box of things to come. But the thing that concerns me, and then they've really come a long way with that, is you get a Class B, they know about it. You're in the protocol. The one that really concerns me is the Class C, and they've redefined the Class C concussion is any altered state. And when I played, and the guys I played with, we had altered states several times every day in practice, not to mention in the game. So the propensity, the opportunity to have brain trauma and that repetitive risk of cumulative trauma over a period of time, it's still there. It's always there. I'm not saying don't play these sports, but be aware of the risks and do your best to protect yourself while participating in them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And not only the symptoms of any altered state, but we have a editorial in the British Journal of Sports Medicine this week talking about the asymptomatic, or we're calling subclinical traumatic brain injuries, and how we need to recognize those. So you don't even have to feel anything to have your brain getting damaged. So look forward to that in a blog that we'll be putting out in a couple of days. But Pete, thank you so much for being here. By the way, I'm looking in the comments. One of your former Redskin, Washington football teammate's wife is here, wants to connect you with him.
Well,
So,
love the connection.
Ms. Kibble, just shoot an email to info@concussionfoundation.org or to me again, Nowinski, concussionfoundation.org, and we'll connect you with Pete.
One point of clarification, Chris, there'll always be the Redskins to me. So
yeah. Well, it's a tough one. All right. Well, thank you, Pete, very much for being here. So I appreciate everyone sticking around. So we're gonna have one more person to speak. Please do stick around for him. Again, thank you, Pete Cronan, for being part of this research. And so before we close, I want to ask Dennis Goldenberg to join us and talk about his support for BANK CTE. And so Dennis has been a supporter of CLF for years, and a generous philanthropist, an experienced philanthropist. And this year he decided to dedicate his funding to the BANK CTE study so that we could accelerate recruiting. As some of you know, this is projected to be a 5-year study, but the faster we can enroll everybody, the faster we'll have results, and the faster we might have that diagnostic for CT. So, Mr. Goldberg, thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting this research. If you wouldn't mind, would you start with sharing, why you got involved in supporting CLF?
Sure, no problem. Hello, everybody. I'm Dennis Goldenberg. I'm based in New Jersey. In my day job, I'm a consultant helping companies to expedite drug development in cancer. I became interested in brain injury and CTE about 2 decades or so ago, and I've bumped into Chris many times over the year. And finally, a couple of years ago, I decided to really get involved in a bigger way. I think that supporting CLF's work, specifically its research and BANK CTE, is very important because there's so much ground to be gained in CTE research, and CTE Bank, or BANK CTE, is almost like a platform from which many discoveries could come. So it's very important work, and I am eager to be involved and support it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, and you mentioned, we were discussing, like, you've supported a lot of different medical causes over the years, and I think one of the things that you mentioned stood out to you is that, in mature disease spaces, there's a lot of funding, but often they've made a lot of the big gains, and now it's incremental gains. But the fact that CT is so new that there's very little funding towards it, and this sort of study has never been done before, but it could theoretically produce, advance the science enough to get that diagnostic. So you want to talk a little about your excitement around what the increased impact is in such a new space?
Sure. And you put it, so well with the word incremental. I think once you've made a lot of discoveries in a certain disease area, sure, it's important to always improve, but the biggest gains are made earlier on. The discoveries with biomarkers and refining things and determining whether certain patient sets are different from another, and developing therapeutics. Other disease areas that have developed effective therapeutics don't have as much new things to offer. Well, that's good for the patients. Meanwhile, things like CTE have a lot of road to gain, and every dollar you provide to support that research, I think, has a bigger effect.
Well said. Yeah. So I just wanted to create a public forum to thank you for your support of this, because, as you know, I've got skin in the game. A lot of the folks in the team have skin in the game, and it's important to us. So Dennis, thank
No
you
problem.
so much.
Glad to be involved.
Yeah, for being here, and thank you for sharing that. And if it's something that you're interested in, if you not only want to enroll, but you also want to help accelerate the study, we'd love to hear from you, because it is, as you know, an uphill battle. I see some people in the comments mentioning some of the sports organizations. We know they're not necessarily, some of them are not rooting for us to figure this out quickly, because it might not help their situation. But this is really what is best, for all of us who've been hitting the head too much. So, so again, thank you, Dennis, so much for being here. And thank you guys for being here and sticking around the whole time. This was a really great webinar. And again, it's some of our best enrollment since COVID, in terms of the number of people who came. And so it shows that there's, and I know you guys have been following this work for a long time. So I can tell by your excitement that you see the potential in this study as much as I do. So hopefully you've learned everything you need to know about this effort to detect CTE in the blood. To learn more, go to bankcte.org. More important, also share this with people in your life who may be eligible. Again, we don't just need the people who are exposed. We are taking controls as well. If you're lucky enough to have not been hit in the head too much, enroll. We expect to see a lot of couples signing up together to go draw their blood and make a date out of it. It could be great. Also, it's important to get a wide berth of people and ages. So if you're like someone my age and you want to invite a parent to come enroll in the study with you, that's not a terrible idea. So on behalf of the BU CTE Center and the Concussion Legacy Foundation, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us today. Together, we can make a breakthrough, and do stay in touch. We look forward to hearing from you and seeing you at the next webinar. Take care.